The autumn of 1878 came to Copper Ridge, bringing with it a cold that seemed to penetrate deeper than bones. Sarah Miller watched through the window of their small cabin as golden leaves danced in the wind, while her hands rested on the belly that remained stubbornly empty. Hey there, thanks for being here. Leave a like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what you think of the story. Let's keep going, Sarah. Thomas's voice cut through the silence like a sharp blade. She turned slowly, already recognizing the tone that preceded painful words. Her husband stood at the kitchen entrance, holding an envelope bearing the town lawyer's seal. "It's decided," he murmured, unable to look directly at her. We can't continue like this." The paper trembled in his hands as he extended it toward her. Sarah didn't need to read it to know what it contained. 5 years of frustrated attempts, 5 years of whispers behind her back at church, 5 years of pitying glances from the other women in the village. Everything culminated in this moment. "Thomas, please." Her voice came out as a whisper, but he had already turned away, his boots echoing heavily on the wooden floor as he headed for the door. The sound of the door closing echoed through the empty house, leaving Sarah alone with a silence that now seemed to swallow her completely. For the first time in years, she allowed her tears to fall freely. 3 weeks had passed since Thomas left, taking with him not only his belongings but also the last remnants of Sarah's former life. The cabin felt enormous in its emptiness, every creak of the wooden beams echoing her solitude. She had taken to sitting by the window for hours, watching the townspeople go about their daily routines, women with children clinging to their skirts, men discussing business outside the general store, families heading to Sunday service together. The knock on her door came unexpectedly on a gray Tuesday morning. Sarah opened it to find Mrs. Henderson, the town's elderly midwife, standing on her doorstep with tired eyes and weathered hands. "I need your help," the older woman said without preamble. "Martha Collins is in labor, and it's not going well. I'm getting too old for these difficult births, and my hands," she held up her arthritic fingers, "they shake too much now." Sarah's heart quickened. "But I don't know anything about. You've got steady hands and a gentle spirit." Mrs. Henderson interrupted. "That's more than most can say. Will you come?" The ride to the Collins homestead was silent except for the rhythmic clip-clop of the horse's hooves. Sarah's mind raced with uncertainty, but something deeper stirred within her, a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Inside the small farmhouse, Martha Collins writhed in pain on a bed soaked with sweat and tears. Her husband paced nearby, his face pale with worry. Mrs. Henderson immediately took charge, but Sarah noticed how the older woman's hands trembled as she examined the struggling mother. "Sarah, come here," Mrs. Henderson whispered. "Feel here, the baby's positioned wrong." With shaking hands, Sarah reached out and felt the life stirring within Martha. In that moment, something awakened inside her. This was life itself, raw and demanding, refusing to be denied. She found herself moving with an intuition she didn't know she possessed, following Mrs. Henderson's guidance but trusting something deeper within herself. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky as Sarah learned to read the rhythms of labor, to offer comfort through touch and presence. When Martha's daughter finally emerged, healthy and screaming, Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. "You have the gift," Mrs. Henderson said quietly, watching Sarah gently clean the newborn. "I've been doing this for 40 years, and I can see it in you." As they prepared to leave, Martha grabbed Sarah's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "I felt safe with you here." Walking back to the wagon, Mrs. Henderson stopped and turned to Sarah. "I'm getting old, and this town needs someone to help bring new life into the world. I could teach you everything I know, if you're willing." Sarah looked back at the farmhouse, where warm light glowed in the windows and a new family celebrated their miracle. For the first time since Thomas left, she felt something other than emptiness. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "Yes, I liked it very much." The ride home was different, filled with possibility instead of despair. Sarah had found her calling in the very thing that had caused her the deepest pain. She would help other women bring life into the world, even if she could never experience the joy herself, or so she believed. The winter months passed in a blur of late-night calls and emergency rides through snow-covered mountain paths. Sarah had thrown herself into her apprenticeship with Mrs. Henderson, learning the ancient art of midwifery with a dedication that surprised even herself. Her hands, once idle and uncertain, now moved with confidence as she helped bring 17 healthy babies into the world. The townspeople began to see her differently. No longer was she Thomas Hayes' barren wife, but rather Sarah, the midwife's apprentice. The change in how others perceived her was subtle, but profound. Respectful nods replaced pitying glances, and women sought her advice on matters of pregnancy and child-rearing. On a crisp October morning, Sarah was grinding herbs in Mrs. Henderson's kitchen when the sound of hoofbeats thundered through the valley. She looked up to see a cloud of dust approaching the town, accompanied by the distinctive blue uniforms of cavalry soldiers. "Military escort," Mrs. Henderson observed, peering through the window. "Haven't seen one of those in months." The townspeople gathered in the main street as the small regiment came to a halt. Captain Morrison, a stern man with graying temples, dismounted and addressed the growing crowd. "We're transporting a prisoner to the territorial capital," he announced. "We'll be staying the night. The man is injured and needs medical attention." Sarah's curiosity was piqued when Dr. Whitman, the town's only physician, approached the captain with obvious reluctance. "What manner of injuries are we discussing, Captain?" "Nothing fatal. Knife wounds from the skirmish where we captured him. But they're festering." The captain's voice carried disgust. "He's one of those Apache renegades who've been raiding settlements up north. Calls himself Elias Blackhawk." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Stories of Apache raids were common currency in conversations, though most in Copper Ridge had never actually encountered a hostile native. "I'll need assistance," Dr. Whitman said reluctantly. "Someone with steady hands for cleaning and bandaging." "I'll help," Sarah heard herself say before she fully realized she'd spoken. Several townspeople turned to stare at her in surprise. Mrs. Henderson raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Dr. Whitman nodded curtly. "Very well. We'll use the jail building." An hour later, Sarah found herself in the small, dim jail cell. Carrying a basin of warm water and clean cloth, the prisoner sat on a narrow cot, his back against the stone wall. When he looked up at her, Sarah felt her breath catch. Elias Blackhawk was not what she had expected. Despite the obvious pain etched in his weathered features, his dark eyes held an intelligence and dignity that unsettled her preconceptions. His long black hair was streaked with premature silver, and his hands, though shackled, moved with careful deliberation. "You're not the doctor," he observed, his English clear and unaccented. "I'm his assistant for this." Sarah set down her supplies, trying to keep her voice steady. "I need to examine your wounds." He studied her for a long moment. "You're afraid." It wasn't a question, and Sarah found herself being honest. "Yes, of me, or of what others will think." The unexpected perceptiveness of the question caught her off guard. She met his gaze directly. "Both, I suppose." Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. "At least you're honest." As Sarah began cleaning the infected cuts on his arm, she was surprised by his stillness. He didn't flinch or make a sound, even when she had to remove embedded dirt and debris. "Why did you volunteer for this?" he asked quietly. Sarah paused in her work. "Someone needs the help. Even someone like me." She looked into his eyes again, seeing pain that went deeper than physical wounds. "Especially someone like you," the words surprised them both. The next morning brought an unexpected complication. Dr. Whitman examined Elias's wounds and discovered what Sarah had already suspected: infection had set in deeper than initially thought. "He can't travel in this condition," the doctor informed Captain Morrison. "The fever alone could kill him on the trail." The captain's face reddened. How long? At least a week, possibly two. Sarah watched the exchange from the doorway, noting how Elias remained silent throughout the discussion of his fate. When the captain stormed out to arrange extended lodging for his men, she approached the cell. "I'll continue treating your wounds," she said simply. Elias looked up from where he sat, his fever-bright eyes focusing on her with effort. Why? The question held weight beyond its simplicity. Sarah considered her answer carefully. "Because healing is what I do now." Over the following days, Sarah found herself spending more time at the jail than anywhere else. She brought fresh bandages, herbal poultices Mrs. Henderson had taught her to make, and broth to help combat the fever. Each visit revealed more about the man behind the feared reputation. "You're not what I expected," Sarah admitted on the third day, changing his bandages with practiced efficiency. "What did you expect? A savage, I suppose. That's what everyone calls you." Elias was quiet for a long moment. "And what do you see now?" Sarah paused in her work, considering. "A man who's been hurt, not just by these wounds." He studied her face intently. "You understand something about being hurt." It wasn't a question, and Sarah felt exposed under his perceptive gaze. "We all have our wounds. Yours are deeper than most, I think." She focused on tying off the clean bandage, uncomfortable with how easily he seemed to read her. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're alone. I know you've been rejected by your own people for something beyond your control. I know you find purpose in healing, because it's the only way to make sense of your pain." Sarah's hands stilled. "How could you possibly?" "Because I see it in how you move, how you speak. You carry shame that isn't yours to bear." The accuracy of his observation was startling. Sarah sank onto the wooden stool beside his cot, suddenly feeling exhausted. "My husband divorced me," she said quietly. "I couldn't give him children. The whole town knows. They pity me, or they think I'm cursed. And you believe them sometimes." The admission came out barely above a whisper. Elias leaned forward despite his shackles. "My people have a different understanding of such things. What your society calls barrenness, we sometimes see as a woman whose purpose lies elsewhere. The earth itself chooses who will nurture in which ways." Sarah looked up at him, startled by the gentleness in his voice. "Your gift for healing, I've watched you work. You have knowledge that goes beyond what the old woman taught you. It comes from within." "That's impossible, is it?" "You knew my wounds were infected before the doctor did. You understood exactly how much pressure to apply when cleaning them. You mixed the herbal poultice without measuring, yet it was perfect." Sarah stared at him, remembering the moments he described. She had acted on instinct, following something she couldn't name. "My grandmother was a medicine woman," Elias continued. "She taught me that healing is as much about seeing the whole person as treating the symptoms. You have that sight. I don't understand." "You will." His voice was growing weaker as the afternoon medications took effect. "When you're ready." As Sarah gathered her supplies to leave, Elias's voice stopped her at the cell door. "Sarah." She turned back. "Your barrenness may not be permanent. Sometimes the body waits for the right conditions, the right healing, to bloom." His words followed her home, echoing in her mind long into the night. The fifth day of Elias's recovery brought unexpected visitors. Sarah arrived at the jail to find Captain Morrison deep in conversation with Reverend Clayton and three of the town's most prominent citizens. Their voices carried the weight of moral authority and barely contained hostility. "It's unseemly," Reverend Clayton was saying. "A divorced woman spending so much time alone with a savage." "People are beginning to talk." Sarah's steps faltered, but she forced herself to continue forward with her medical supplies. "Mrs. Miller," Captain Morrison acknowledged her coolly. "Perhaps it would be better if Dr. Whitman handled the prisoner's care from now on." "The doctor asked for my assistance," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the flutter of anxiety in her chest. "The patient is responding well to the current treatment." "The patient." Reverend Clayton emphasized the word with distaste. as a heathen warrior who has undoubtedly committed unspeakable acts against Christian families through the cell bars. Sarah could see Elias listening to every word, his expression carefully neutral. Something in his stillness made her realize how deeply these judgments cut. Despite his composed exterior, he is a human being who needs medical care, Sarah said quietly. Nothing more, nothing less. The men exchanged glances laden with meaning. Mr. Thompson, the bank president, spoke up. Sarah, we understand you've been through difficult times, but associating with his kind will only damage your reputation further. The implication hung in the air like a threat. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks, partly from embarrassment, but mostly from anger. My reputation is my own concern, gentlemen. She brushed past them into the cell, where Elias watched her with those perceptive dark eyes. His fever had broken during the night, and he looked stronger, more alert. You didn't have to defend me, he said quietly once the men had left. Yes, I did. Sarah began unpacking her supplies with perhaps more force than necessary. They don't know you, neither. Do you? Not really. She paused in mixing the herbal salve. I know enough. What do you know? The question challenged her to examine her own assumptions. I know you're intelligent. I know you're patient with pain. I know you see things others miss. She hesitated, then continued. I know you've helped me understand something about myself. And what's that? That maybe I've been accepting other people's definitions of who I am, instead of discovering it for myself. Elias nodded slowly. That's the first step toward true healing. Over the next hour, as Sarah tended to his wounds, Elias began sharing fragments of his world. He spoke of plants that could ease pain, of rituals that prepared the body for new life, of his grandmother who could sense pregnancy before even the woman herself knew. In my culture, he said as Sarah applied fresh bandages, a woman who struggles to conceive is often taken to sacred places, given specific herbs, taught to listen to her body's deeper rhythms. Do such things actually work? Sometimes. The body and spirit are connected in ways your people don't fully understand. When the spirit is wounded by shame, by fear, by believing others' judgments, the body often reflects that wounding. Sarah's hand stilled. You think my condition might be related to how I see myself. I think you've carried so much shame about your perceived failure that your body has closed itself off like a flower that won't bloom in harsh conditions. That evening, Sarah sat in her empty cabin, staring at the herbs she'd gathered for Elias's treatment. His words echoed in her mind, challenging everything she'd accepted about her limitations. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that her childlessness might not be a permanent sentence. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. The eighth day brought crisis in an unexpected form. Sarah woke to urgent pounding on her door and found young Billy Henderson, the midwife's grandson, breathless on her doorstep. Miss Sarah, Grandma's taken ill with a fever. Mrs. Patterson's gone into labor, and there's complications. She's asking for you. Sarah's blood ran cold. Mrs. Henderson had been her anchor, her teacher, her guide into this new life. Without her wisdom and steady presence, Sarah felt suddenly adrift. How bad is the fever? Bad enough she can't leave her bed. Dr. Whitman's with her now, but he says someone needs to tend to Mrs. Patterson immediately. Sarah grabbed her medical bag, her mind racing. She had assisted with 17 births, but never as the primary attendant. The weight of responsibility felt crushing. At the Patterson farmhouse, she found chaos. Mrs. Patterson's labor had been going for nearly 20 hours, and her strength was failing. Her husband paced frantically while her mother wrung her hands in the corner. Thank God you're here. Mrs. Patterson gasped between contractions. Something's wrong. The baby. It's not coming right. Sarah's hands trembled as she examined the struggling mother. The baby was breached, positioned wrong, and Mrs. Patterson was weakening with each passing hour. This was exactly the kind of complicated birth that required experience she didn't possess. In her desperation, she found herself thinking of Elias's words about listening to her body's deeper wisdom, about trusting instincts that went beyond formal training. She closed her eyes and tried to feel what the situation needed. Her hands seemed to move of their own accord, gently repositioning, coaxing, working with the natural rhythms, rather than fighting against them. Hours passed in a blur of focused concentration, sweat, and whispered encouragements. When Mrs. Patterson's son finally emerged, healthy and crying lustily, the room erupted in tears of relief and joy. Sarah found herself shaking, overwhelmed by what had just transpired. "I don't know how you did it," Mrs. Patterson's mother said, embracing Sarah. "You saved them both." Walking home in the early morning light, Sarah felt a profound shift within herself. She had faced her greatest fear, carrying full responsibility for life and death, and discovered reserves of knowledge and intuition she hadn't known she possessed. She went straight to the jail. "You look different," Elias observed as she approached his cell. "I delivered a baby last night. A difficult birth. Mrs. Henderson was too ill to help, and I think I understand what you meant about listening to deeper wisdom. I knew things I shouldn't have known, felt things I'd never been taught." Elias smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. "You're beginning to trust yourself." "The townspeople are pressuring me to stop treating you," Sarah said quietly. "They think it's inappropriate, then you should stop." His response surprised her. "You want me to abandon your care? I want you to choose freely, not from obligation or defiance, but from your own truth." Sarah studied his face, seeing the careful neutrality that masked deeper feelings. "What if my truth is that I don't want to stop? Then you'll need to be prepared for consequences. And if those consequences mean leaving Copper Ridge," the question hung between them, heavy with implication. Elias searched her eyes intently. "Where would you go?" "I don't know yet, but I'm beginning to think there might be places where healing is valued more than conformity." "There are such places. Could you show me?" The silence stretched between them, filled with possibility and danger in equal measure. "Yes," he said finally. "When I'm strong enough to travel, I could show you a different way of living." Sarah nodded, her heart racing with fear and anticipation. She was contemplating abandoning everything she'd ever known, but for the first time in years. The future held promise instead of just empty repetition. Mrs. Henderson recovered from her fever after 3 days, but the experience had aged her visibly. When Sarah visited her mentor's cottage, she found the older woman sitting by the fire. Her usual energy diminished. "I heard about the Patterson birth," Mrs. Henderson said without preamble. "Mary Patterson told me you worked miracles that night. I just did what felt right." "That's exactly what I mean." Mrs. Henderson's eyes were sharp despite her weakened state. "You found something I could never teach you, the ability to trust your instincts completely." Sarah settled into the chair beside her mentor. "The town council wants to meet with me tomorrow." "About the Apache?" "Yes." Double quotes. Mrs. Henderson was quiet for a long moment. "What will you tell them?" "I don't know yet. Child, I've lived in this town for 40 years. I've seen how it treats those who don't conform to its narrow expectations. You've already paid a price for being different. Are you prepared to pay an even higher one?" The next morning, Sarah found herself facing 5 stern men in the town hall. Reverend Clayton sat at the center, flanked by the bank president, the mayor, and the prominent ranchers. Captain Morrison stood near the window, his arms crossed. "Mrs. Miller," Reverend Clayton began, "we've called this meeting to discuss your association with the prisoner. My medical treatment of a patient, you mean? Don't be coy. You've been spending inappropriate amounts of time alone with a dangerous savage." "People are talking." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "And what exactly are people saying?" Mr. Thompson leaned forward. "They're saying you've become too attached to this heathen. That you're forgetting your place as a Christian woman." "My place?" "The divorced woman must be especially careful of her reputation," the mayor added. "A further impropriety could make your position in this community untenable." The threat was clear. Sarah looked around the room at these men who had decided they had the right to dictate her choices, her associations, her very existence. And if I refuse to comply with your demands, then you'll find Copper Ridge a very lonely place, Reverend Clayton said coldly. Sarah stood. Slowly. Gentlemen, I've been lonely in this town since the day my marriage ended. Your threats don't frighten me because I've already lost everything you think you can take away. She walked toward the door, then turned back. I'll continue treating my patient until he's fully recovered. After that, my decisions are my own. That afternoon, she found Elias testing the strength in his healing arm. His wounds had closed cleanly, and the infection was completely gone. You look ready to travel, Sarah observed. I am. Captain Morrison plans to move out tomorrow morning. To the territorial capital. Yes. To prison. Most likely. Sarah sat heavily on the wooden stool. They want me to stop treating you, the town. Council made that very clear this morning. What did you tell them? That I make my own decisions. Elias studied her face carefully. And what have you decided? Sarah took a deep breath. That I can't go back to who I was before I met you. You've shown me possibilities I never imagined. Sarah, I want to learn the healing ways you spoke of. I want to understand what my body and spirit are truly capable of. I want to discover who I really am, not who this town thinks I should be. Elias was quiet for a long moment. The path I could show you would be difficult. You'd be leaving everything familiar behind. Everything familiar has already rejected me. You could face dangers you've never imagined. I'm already facing the danger of living a half-life forever. When he looked at her, Sarah saw something new in his eyes, hope mixed with deep concern. If you're certain, there may be a way, but you'll need to trust me completely. I already do. The plan was dangerously simple. During Sarah's final medical visit that evening, she would slip Elias a small file hidden in her bandage supplies. He would work on his shackles through the night, and when the guards changed at dawn, she would create a distraction while he made his escape. Once I'm free, I'll wait for you at Eagle's Rest, Elias whispered as Sarah cleaned his wounds for what appeared to be the last time. Do you know the place? Sarah nodded. Eagle's Rest was a distinctive rock formation about 5 miles northeast of town, visible from the main road, but isolated enough to provide cover. Pack light only what you absolutely need. Food, water, warm clothes, your medical supplies, nothing else. How long do I wait before following you? Give me 2 hours after the alarm is raised. Then slip away quietly. Don't let anyone see you leave. That night, Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling of her empty cabin. By this time tomorrow, she would either be fleeing into the wilderness with a man she barely knew, or facing the consequences of a failed escape attempt. The weight of her decision pressed down on her like a physical thing. She rose before dawn and packed her saddlebags with methodical precision: dried meat, hardtack, a water skin, her warmest dress, her medical supplies, and the small amount of money she'd saved from her midwifery work. At the last moment, she added her mother's Bible, not from religious conviction, but as a link to the woman who had taught her to be strong. The commotion started just after sunrise. Shouting voices, running feet, the sound of men mounting horses. In haste, Sarah peered through her window to see Captain Morrison organizing a search party, his face dark with fury. Check every building, he barked. Question everyone. That savage couldn't have gotten far. Sarah forced herself to go about her normal morning routine, feeding her chickens, drawing water from the well, all while her heart hammered against her ribs. Mrs. Henderson appeared at her door, looking worried. Did you hear? The Apache prisoner escaped during the night, cut through his shackles somehow. How terrible, Sarah managed, hoping her voice sounded appropriately shocked. Captain Morrison is questioning everyone who had contact with him. He'll probably want to speak with you since you were treating his wounds. Of course. I'll cooperate however I can. An hour later, Captain Morrison arrived with 2 soldiers. His interrogation was thorough but revealed nothing. Sarah's shock at the news appeared genuine, and she had witnesses to her presence in town that morning. If he contacts you, the captain warned, you're to report it immediately. These savages sometimes develop attachments to women who show them kindness. I understand completely. Captain, after they left, Sarah waited another agonizing hour before saddling her horse. She told Mrs. Henderson she was riding out to check on the Patterson baby, a story that would explain her absence until evening. The ride to Eagle's Rest felt endless. Every sound made her jump, every bird call seemed like a signal of discovery. But when she reached the towering rock formation, she found Elias waiting in its shadow. No longer the shackled prisoner, but a free man in his element. You came, he said, relief evident in his voice. Did you doubt I would? I hope. But I know what it costs to leave everything behind. Sarah looked back toward Copper Ridge. Visible as a small cluster of buildings in the distance, everything she had ever known lay in the direction safety, predictability, the familiar weight of others' expectations. Then she turned to face the unknown wilderness stretching endlessly before them. I'm ready, she said, and meant it completely. They rode hard for the first 2 days, putting distance between themselves and any possible pursuit. Elias led them through terrain Sarah had never imagined: narrow canyon passes, hidden valleys, trails that seemed to disappear and reappear like whispers in the landscape. On the third evening, they made camp beside a small stream and a sheltered grove. Sarah's body ached from the unaccustomed riding, and her hands were blistered despite her gloves. She watched Elias move with easy confidence, setting up their camp with efficient, practiced motions. You're not what I expected either, she said as he built a small, smokeless fire. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone more primitive, I suppose. She felt embarrassed by the admission. Elias smiled. I lived among your people for 2 years before the war started again. I learned to read and write English, studied your medical books, even attended some of your church services. Why? To understand. My grandfather believed that to survive, we needed to know our neighbors' ways as well as our own. His expression darkened. He was right, though not in the way he hoped. That night, Sarah learned her first lesson in wilderness survival. Elias showed her which plants could be eaten, which ones eased pain, and which ones helped women's monthly cycles. His knowledge seemed endless and precise. Your grandmother taught you all this. She started teaching me when I was 7. Said I had the healing gift, even though I was male. It's usually passed from grandmother to granddaughter. Sarah felt a pang of longing. I never knew my grandmother. She died when I was very young. Then perhaps the spirits guided you to me for a different kind of teaching. On the 4th day, they reached a hidden valley Elias called the Sanctuary. A small lake reflected the surrounding peaks, and hot springs sent gentle steam into the cool morning air. Adobe ruins dotted the valley floor, remnants of an ancient settlement. My people came here for healing ceremonies, Elias explained as they made camp near the springs. The waters have special properties, and the plants that grow here are more potent than those found elsewhere. Will we stay here long? As long as you need to learn what you came to learn. That evening, as Sarah soaked her travel-weary body in the warm springs, she felt something shifting within her. The constant tension she carried for years was beginning to dissolve, replaced by a sense of possibility she'd almost forgotten existed. Tomorrow, we begin your real education, Elias said when she returned to their fire. What kind of education? First, you'll learn to listen to your body without judgment or fear. Your people have taught you to see your body as flawed, broken, before any healing can happen. You must learn to see it as it truly is, a vessel capable of great things. Sarah pulled her blanket closer around herself. And if I discover that I truly am barren, that nothing can change that, then you'll know your truth instead of living with your fears. But I don't think that's what we'll discover. How can you be so certain? Elias poked at the fire, sending sparks dancing into the star-filled sky. Because I've watched you work. I've seen how your body responds to the presence of new life. When you delivered the baby, when you treated my wounds, your body knew things your mind hadn't learned. The knowledge doesn't come from books or training. Where does it come from? From the same place that will teach you to heal your deepest. Well, Sarah stared into the flames, afraid to hope but unable to stop herself. Tomorrow would bring answers she'd been afraid to seek for years. Sarah's education began at sunrise. Elias woke her gently and led her to a flat stone beside the lake. Where the morning mist still rose from the water's surface, sit, he instructed. Close your eyes. Tell me what you feel in your body. I don't understand, not what you think. About your body, what you actually feel. Start with your breath. Sarah closed her eyes hesitantly. For several minutes, she sat in uncomfortable silence, aware mainly of her self-consciousness. Then, gradually, she began to notice things. The steady rhythm of her heartbeat, the way her lungs expanded and contracted, the warmth of the stone beneath her. I feel peaceful, she said, surprised. Good. Now place your hands on your belly. Don't think about what it represents or what it hasn't given you. Just feel the life force there. Sarah's hands trembled as she followed his instruction. For so long, touching her stomach had meant confronting her failure. But now, in this sacred valley, she felt something different: warmth, potential, a subtle energy she'd never noticed before. There's something there, she whispered. What do you feel? Like sleeping seeds waiting for the right season to grow. Elias nodded. Your body is not broken, Sarah. It's been waiting. Over the following days, Elias taught her to prepare specific herbal teas: red clover for fertility, nettle for strength, wild yam for hormonal balance. Each plant had to be gathered at the right time of day, prepared with specific rituals, consumed with proper intention. Healing is not just about the medicine, he explained as they gathered moonbright evening primrose. It's about aligning your spirit with your body's natural wisdom. How do I do that? By releasing the shame you've carried. Shame creates contraction. In the body, your womb has been closed not just physically, but energetically. Sarah learned to swim in the sacred lake, to sit in meditation by the hot springs, to sleep under stars without fear. Slowly, the constant tension she carried began to dissolve. Her monthly cycles, irregular for years, became more predictable. Her skin cleared, her eyes brightened, her movements became more fluid. You're becoming who you were meant to be, Elias observed one evening as they shared their simple meal. I feel different, stronger, more alive. Your body is remembering its purpose. As the weeks passed, their relationship deepened beyond teacher and student. Sarah found herself drawn to Elias not just for his wisdom, but for his quiet strength, his patient kindness, his way of seeing her not as damaged, but as whole. One night, as they sat by their campfire, he reached out and touched her face gently. Sarah, she leaned into his touch, feeling something unlock deep within her chest. When he kissed her, it was with a reverence that made her understand the difference between being wanted and being truly seen. That night, for the first time in her life, Sarah felt complete in her own skin. In Elias's arms, she discovered a passion she'd never known existed, a connection that seemed to awaken every sleeping part of herself. Afterward, as they lay together under the vast canopy of stars, Sarah felt a profound shift in her body, as if something that had been holding itself closed had finally opened. Do you feel that? Elias murmured against her hair. Yes. Sarah's voice was full of wonder. Something's changed. Your body recognizes love, real love. It's safe to bloom now. 3 weeks later, Sarah woke with a strange nausea and a heightened sensitivity to smells. When she missed her monthly cycle, she knew with absolute certainty what had happened. The miracle she'd been told was impossible had, quietly, naturally occurred. The discovery of her pregnancy filled Sarah with a joy so profound it frightened her. After years of believing herself barren, the reality of new life growing within her felt like a miracle beyond comprehension. Are you certain? Elias asked, though his eyes already held the answer. Sarah nodded, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat belly. I can feel it, not just the sickness, there's a presence there. A tiny spark of life. Elias knelt beside her and placed his own hand over hers. My grandmother always said the spirits choose their time. This child chose to come when you were finally ready to receive it. The early weeks brought challenges Sarah hadn't anticipated. The morning sickness was severe, lasting well into each afternoon. Her body, so recently awakened to health, now seemed to be reshaping itself entirely. This is normal, Elias assured her as he prepared a tea of ginger and mint. Your body is creating space for new life. Every discomfort serves a purpose. But as her pregnancy progressed, more serious concerns arose. By the 3rd month, Sarah began experiencing sharp pains and episodes of bleeding that left her terrified. Something's wrong, she whispered one morning after a particularly frightening episode. I'm going to lose this baby just like… No. Elias's voice was firm but gentle. Fear creates what it expects. Your body knows how to nurture this child, but your mind is fighting against it. How can you be so calm? I could be miscarrying right now, because I can see what you cannot yet see. This child is strong, determined. The bleeding is your body adjusting, not failing. Elias prepared special tonic shred raspberry leaf to strengthen her womb, blessed thistle to prevent miscarriage, wild rose hips for vital energy. He taught her breathing techniques to calm her fears and guided her through gentle movements that supported her changing body. Every indigenous woman I've known has faced this uncertainty, he told her during one of her darkest moments. The difference is, they trusted their bodies instead of fearing them. Slowly, Sarah learned to listen to her body's wisdom rather than her mind's anxieties. The bleeding episodes became less frequent and eventually stopped altogether. Her energy returned, bringing with it a radiance that seemed to glow from within. As winter approached, they built a more substantial shelter near the hot springs, a cozy dwelling that would protect them through the cold months and provide a safe place for the birth. Sarah marveled at how naturally domestic life came to her in this wild place, freed from the constraints and expectations of civilization. Will you tell me about your people? She asked one evening as they worked together, her hands busy with sewing while he carved a cradle from fallen cedar. What do you want to know? Everything. I want our child to know both sides of their heritage. Elias shared stories of his grandmother's wisdom, of seasonal ceremonies that honored the cycles of life, of children who grew up understanding their place in the web of all living things. His voice carried pride and grief in equal measure. And what will you tell our child about your people? He asked. Sarah considered the question carefully, that they meant well, but they forgot how to trust in natural wisdom, that sometimes love requires leaving what's familiar to find what's true. That's a good lesson. As her belly rounded with their growing child, Sarah felt herself becoming someone entirely new. She was no longer the rejected wife, the barren woman, the desperate seeker. She was a mother-to-be, a healer, a woman who had found her place in the world by having the courage to leave it behind. The life growing within her was proof that miracles were possible. When fear gave way to love, spring arrived with Sarah's 7th month of pregnancy. Her belly had grown round and full, and she moved with the careful grace of a woman carrying precious cargo. The child within her was active, responding to Elias's voice when he spoke to her belly, settling peacefully when Sarah sang the lullabies her own mother had once sung to her. They had established a peaceful routine in their hidden valley. Mornings were spent gathering herbs and preparing for the birth. Afternoons found them working on the baby's cradle, sewing tiny clothes, and preparing the birthing space according to the traditions Elias had learned from his grandmother. Evenings brought quiet conversations about their hopes for their child and the kind of life they would build together. It was during one such peaceful afternoon that the sound of horses' hooves echoed through the canyon, shattering their sanctuary's tranquility. Sarah looked up from her sewing, her heart immediately racing. Who would know to find us here? Elias was already moving, his body tense with protective instincts. Stay in the shelter. Don't come out. Unless I call for you through a crack in the wooden walls. Sarah watched as 3 riders emerged from the canyon pass. Her blood turned to ice when she recognized the lead rider's familiar silhouette. Thomas. Her former husband sat his horse with the same rigid posture she remembered. But his face was harder now, marked by months of what appeared to be searching. Behind him rode 2 men she didn't recognize, rough-looking individuals, with the bearing of hired trackers. I know you're here, Sarah, Thomas called out, his voice carrying across the valley. I've spent the better part of a year searching for you. Elias stepped into view, positioning himself between the riders and the shelter. You're trespassing on sacred ground. Thomas's laugh was bitter. Sacred to who? You savages. This is still American territory, and that woman is still my wife under the law. She was never truly your wife, Elias replied calmly. You abandoned her when she needed you most. I came to bring her home, to give her another chance. I was hasty in my decision to divorce her. We can make this right from her hiding place. Sarah felt a surge of disbelief. Thomas had spent months tracking her down, not from love, but from wounded pride and the realization that he had lost something valuable. Sarah. Thomas called again. I know what he's done to you, filling your head with his heathen nonsense. But you belong with your own kind. Come out, and we'll say no more about this unfortunate episode. Sarah's hand moved protectively over her swollen belly. The baby shifted restlessly, as if sensing her distress. She couldn't let Thomas see her condition, couldn't bear the thought of him claiming any right to the child she carried. She's not here, Elias said firmly. And even if she were, she's made her choice. One of the trackers leaned forward in his saddle. We know she's here, Indian. We found tracks, signs of a woman living in this valley. Best you step aside before this gets unpleasant. The only thing unpleasant here is your presence. Elias replied, his hand moving subtly toward the knife at his belt. Thomas's voice turned cold. I know she's pregnant, Sarah. I spoke to Mrs. Henderson before I left Copper Ridge. She mentioned your condition during the months before you disappeared. That child could be mine. Sarah's breath caught. The timeline was impossible. She hadn't been with Thomas for over a year before leaving Copper Ridge. But she realized he was grasping at any justification for claiming her. Come out now, and I'll accept the child as my own, Thomas continued. Refuse, and I'll have to take you by force. I brought witnesses this time. The threat hung in the air like poison. Sarah realized that her past had finally caught up with her paradise, and the life she built with Elias was about to face its greatest test. Sarah knew the moment had come to face her past. She couldn't hide behind walls while Elias faced 3 armed men alone, and she couldn't allow Thomas to build his claims on lies and assumptions. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out of the shelter. The sight of her stopped Thomas mid-sentence. His eyes widened as he took in her transformed appearance, the healthy glow of her skin, the confident way she held herself despite her advanced pregnancy, the unmistakable radiance of a woman who had found her true place in the world. Sarah. His voice came out as barely a whisper. She walked slowly to Elias's side, her hand resting protectively on her belly. Hello, Thomas. My God, look at you. Thomas dismounted, his eyes fixed on her rounded form. You're actually pregnant? Yes. Sarah's voice was steady, stronger than she'd ever heard it. Something you told me was impossible. But that's just it. It proves what I've been saying. If you can carry a child now, it means we can have. No. The single word cut through his hope like a blade. This pregnancy has nothing to do with you. Thomas, nothing at all. The timeline suggests otherwise. When did you leave Copper Ridge? 7, 8 months ago. Sarah felt Elias tense beside her, but she remained calm. I left Copper Ridge 10 months ago. Thomas, this child was conceived here, in the sacred valley, with the man I love. That's impossible. You were barren. Dr. Whitman confirmed it. Multiple doctors confirmed it. I was barren with you. Sarah's words carried a weight that made Thomas step backward. My body knew what my mind couldn't accept, that you were the wrong man for me. One of the trackers shifted restlessly in his saddle. Boss, maybe we should just take her and sort this out later. No one is taking anyone, Elias said quietly, but his voice carried unmistakable danger. Sarah moved slightly forward, drawing attention back to herself. Thomas, look at me. Really look at me. For the first time since his arrival, Thomas met her eyes directly. What he saw there seemed to shake him. The woman who had once looked at him with desperate hope and crushing disappointment now regarded him with calm certainty. I'm not the same woman you divorced, Sarah continued. The woman was dying slowly, trying to be something she wasn't, trying to please people who would never accept her. This woman, she gestured to herself, is alive, complete, happy. You can't be happy living like a savage in the wilderness. I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. Thomas's face cycled through confusion, denial, and growing anger. This is madness, Sarah. You've been bewitched by this heathen. Come home with me. We can try again. I'll be more patient this time. Patient, Sarah's voice rose slightly. Thomas, you divorced me because I couldn't give you children, you told me I was worthless as a woman. You let the entire town treat me like a failure. And now, because you see me pregnant, you think you can simply claim me again? I made a mistake. Yes, you did. You mistook my inability to conceive with you for a permanent condition. You mistook your rejection and cruelty for acceptable treatment of a wife. You mistook ownership for love. Sarah stepped closer to Elias, taking his hand. This man saw my worth when I couldn't see it myself. He helped me heal not just my body, but my spirit. He loves me not for what I can give him, but for who I am. You're my wife. I was never truly your wife, Thomas. I was your disappointment. The finality in her voice seemed to break something in Thomas. His face darkened with rage and desperation. I won't let you throw your life away for this savage. But Sarah was no longer the broken woman he had once controlled. She stood tall, radiant with purpose, her hand resting on the life growing within her. My life isn't being thrown away, Thomas. It's finally beginning. Thomas stared at Sarah for a long moment, his face a battlefield of emotions, rage, disbelief, and something that might have been the first stirrings of genuine understanding. The woman before him bore little resemblance to the desperate, broken person he had divorced. You've changed, he said finally, his voice quiet. Yes, I have. I don't understand how. But Thomas looked around the valley, taking in the peaceful beauty, the carefully tended garden, the evidence of a life built with love and intention. You look complete. Sarah felt Elias's hand squeeze hers gently. I am complete, Thomas. For the first time in my life, one of the trackers cleared his throat impatiently. Boss, what's it gonna be? Thomas continued to study Sarah's face, and slowly, something shifted in his expression. The rigid anger began to dissolve, replaced by what looked like genuine remorse. I was a fool, he said quietly. I thought if I could bring you back, I could fix what I broke. But I can see now that what I broke was already broken long before you left. Thomas, no. Let me say this. He took a step back, his posture less aggressive. I never saw you. Did I? Not really. I saw what I wanted you to be, what I needed you to be, but never who you actually were. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from the unexpected gift of recognition. You deserve this happiness, Thomas continued, gesturing toward the valley, toward Elias, toward the life growing within her. I can see that now, and I hope you can forgive me for taking so long to understand. I forgave you months ago. Thomas, I had to, for my own peace. He nodded, then turned to his companions. We're leaving. But boss, I said we're leaving. Thomas remounted his horse, then looked down at Sarah one final time. Be happy, Sarah. Be the woman you were always meant to be. As the sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance, Sarah felt the last chains of her old life fall away. She turned. To Elias, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's over," she whispered. "It's just beginning," he corrected, pulling her into his arms. 2 months later, on a warm summer morning, Sarah gave birth to a healthy daughter beside the sacred lake. The labor was long but peaceful, attended only by Elias and the ancient spirits of the valley. When her daughter finally emerged, perfect and screaming with life, Sarah understood that every moment of pain and rejection had led to this perfect joy. They named her Dawn, a child born of two worlds, carrying the best of both. As Sarah nursed her daughter in the gentle morning light, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here. The woman who had once believed herself worthless now held the greatest treasure in her arms. The woman who had once thought herself barren had become not just a mother, but a healer whose reputation began to spread among the scattered settlements of the territory. People came to the hidden valley seeking her help, women struggling with infertility, families needing healing, lost souls searching for wholeness. Sarah welcomed them all, sharing the wisdom she had learned about listening to one's deepest truth. Years passed peacefully. More children came to sons who grew strong and wise under their father's guidance. Learning the ways of both their heritages, Sarah's healing practice flourished, and the valley became known as a place where miracles happened naturally, on quiet evenings. As she watched Elias teach their children about the plants and animals of their mountain home, Sarah sometimes thought of Copper Ridge and the life she had left behind. She felt only gratitude for the pain that had forced her to seek something better, for the courage that had allowed her to embrace the unknown, and for the love